I used to work at a civil rights organization. I traveled all over the country doing workshops on prejudice, discrimination, and harassment. I worked in all sorts of organizations with all sorts of people. I worked in prisons and in schools with police officers, gang members, nurses, federal employees. The job was intense, emotionally and physically, but I loved it. For the first time in my life, I was working with a team of people who were like-minded, who were passionately dedicated to civil rights, social justice, and eradicating racism. Then one day, I had a meeting with a woman I supervised. It was a check-in on a project she was working on. We were troubleshooting and talking about upcoming deadlines. Just as we were wrapping up the conversation, she stopped me. She said, "Lelia, I feel like you're an angry waitress that doesn't want to serve me." I walked out of that meeting thinking, what the hell? Did I really just hear that? Holy moly. A white woman just complained to me, a woman of color, her supervisor, that I act like I don't want to serve her. That was so wrong on so many levels. I was stunned. And I was hurt. So I sat on it for a few days and then decided I needed to talk to my boss about it. I just couldn't carry it on my own anymore. Now, my boss at that time was the founder of our organization. He was a nationally respected expert. He would swoop into communities and help them see the racially hostile climate they created. And then he would offer heartfelt and really effective lessons on how to be more tolerant and respectful. So when I told him about the angry waitress comment, I really expected that he would get how racially loaded that was for me. He was so good at seeing the subtleties of racism in so many other places. I thought for sure I'd just have to repeat that sentence and he would understand. But understanding is not what I got. Instead, I got, "Lelia, I'm sure that had nothing to do with race. Sarah's not a racist." That experience taught me some really important lessons about the way racism works and why it continues. The angry waitress comment was a perfect example of the way that racism shows up in our everyday lives. It's all those unintentional and intentional words and messages that tell the story of racism, that white is right and brown is down. The other really big lesson that I learned from that experience was that our skepticism really helps perpetuate racism. I mean, our inability or unwillingness to see it and accept it when it's right here in front of us. Every time we're skeptical about racism, we're making room for it and allowing it to continue and grow. Now, our skepticism shows up in a few ways. Some people are skeptical because they believe that only mean, nasty people do racist things. You know, angry bullies who boldly express their hostility, condone violence against brown people. Like those old-timers like Bull Connor and George Wallace and David Duke. Now, I know these days it feels like we are surrounded by racist bullies, but believe me, they are not doing all the work. Every day, good, kind, generous people do racist things. People like my colleague Sarah, and people like us. We're skeptical because we're looking for that big bad bully. If we don't have the bully, then we can't believe we're seeing racism. That's what happened with my boss. He knew Sarah to be gentle and kind, so he couldn't hear that anything she said could be racist. We need to focus on racist words, actions, and beliefs, and set aside that is he or isn't she a racist litmus test. Another way that our skepticism shows up is in our tendency to really grab on to alternative explanations. We're so reluctant to believe that racism is right here in front of us that if we can come up with any other reason, any other story, we grab onto that instead. We're skeptical because most of us just hate the idea that that nastiness and injustice is here, that it's still going on and part of us. We want to think of it as up there or back there, but not right here with us. That's why so many good anti-racist people can tell you national statistics about poverty for people of color, or they can tell you the whole history of the civil rights movement in the United States. But they can't see how racism keeps brown people out of their neighborhoods, or how it makes their very well-paid workplace predominantly white. Now, I want to be clear, I don't think that white people are the only people who are skeptical about racism. I think brown people are skeptical too, but I think it works for us in a slightly different way. You see, when you're a person of color and you encounter racism, it hurts to the core. The message is that people like you are not equal. You're not valued. You're not even human. And so when you're a person of color and you encounter racism, it is deeply humiliating. It's so painful that you don't want to go there. So you tick through those alternative explanations. You say, well, maybe something else happened before I came in. Maybe that really wasn't about me. When a person of color finally speaks up about racism, they've already eliminated all the alternative explanations. And they're saying it because it's here, now, and it's true. And in our climate, you take that deep breath, you still yourself and pull up your strength, and you say that you think you've experienced racism, and what do you get? Skepticism. You hear the message, I don't believe you. I don't trust you. You're too sensitive or emotionally unstable to really know. I know better. The thing that I think is the worst part about our skepticism is it's a distraction. It's a reason to do nothing. When someone comes and tells you that something is racist, they're telling you that someone is not being valued. Someone's not getting a fair shot. So why would you respond by being the racism judge and trying to determine, is it really or is it really not racism? Could there really be any harm? And if you just set aside your skepticism for a minute and just said, let's see what we can do to make this right? Could it ever really be too much? Every time I get to that point, my brain stops because I really can't think of any harm that could be done if we really believed that racism is here every day in subtle and in obvious ways all over our lives. Now, I'm sure there are some people who would say, oh, we can't believe every charge of racism. People of color are going to totally take advantage of that. But that in and of itself is a racist comment. I think we could set aside our skepticism. And if we really devoted our energy to addressing racism, we could make some progress. And you could help with that, you. You could be that confirmation person, that person who bravely and gently pushes back on skepticism to say, wait a minute, let's just accept it and see if we can make things better. Lately, I've been binge watching this anime show with my son, Gareth. It's about teenage ninjas who are training to fight evil. I love watching it. It's a chance for me to hang out with my very, very cool son. And I also love it because the lead character, Naruto, whenever he's about to take on some challenge, he yells, "Believe it!" That's what I think we need to do when we come face to face with racism. Believe it! Thank you.